Someone wrote the name of the Antichrist inside Isaiah. It wasn't Isaiah. You're going to see that name, the hand that put it there 1400 years later, and why everyone who did the same thing was wrong. It's in the Aramaic Targum of Isaiah 11:4. If it serves you, leave your like. Let's start where everyone looks. When someone wants to find the Antichrist in Isaiah, they open chapter 14, always 14, and verse 12. That verse goes like this: How you have fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. You have been cut down to the ground, you who have weakened the nations. The Hebrew word behind Lucifer is Helel, and it comes with two others, Ben Shachar. Helel Ben Shachar, the shining one, son of the dawn. The Greek translators of the Old Testament, those of the Septuagint, rendered it in Greek as Heosphoros, the one who brings the dawn. Jerome, when he brought the Old Testament into Latin in the 4th century, wrote Lucifer, which in Latin means exactly the same thing, the one who carries the light. Here, something happens that's worth watching carefully, because it's the origin of almost all the confusion. The 17th century English translators didn't translate that Latin word. They copied it. They left it as is, with a capital letter, as if it were someone's proper name. Jerome translated, "Those who came after copied." And from that copying was born an identity that never existed in Hebrew. But that's not the most important thing in this passage. The most important thing is 8 verses before, in the heading the text itself puts on the poem, Isaiah 14, verse 4. The text declares in plain language against whom the poem is written, "You shall take up this proverb against the king of Babylon." That's not a hint. It's a label put by the text itself before the poem begins. The poem ends the same way. Verse 16, "Those who see you will gaze at you and consider you, saying, 'Is this the man who made the earth tremble?'" Verse 20, "You will not be joined with them in burial, because you have ruined your land." A man, a burial problem, a human being. About the word itself, the one that dragged centuries of discussion, there is a fact verifiable in any serious lexicon. Brown, Driver, and Briggs, which is the standard Hebrew dictionary, classifies Helel as an appellative noun. That means it's not a proper name, it's a descriptor, like saying the shining one or the radiant one. It appears once, one time. In the entire Hebrew Bible, that word exists only in Isaiah 14:12. Think about that for a second. The word millions of people believe is the secret name of God's enemy is an adjective the Hebrew uses once, and it uses it inside a poem that the text itself dedicates to a king of flesh and blood. There's something more about that word, recorded in the lexicons, that shows just how open this matter was from the beginning. The ancient translators didn't even agree on where it comes from. The most common reading connects it to a Hebrew root, meaning to shine. From there comes the shining one, the morning star, the radiant one. That's the reading behind the Greek of the Septuagint and the Latin of Jerome. But there was another, Aquila, who made a very literal Greek version in the 2nd century. And also the Syriac version derived that word from a different root. A root that doesn't mean to shine. It means to howl, to wail. That's not a marginal oddity. Jerome himself, in his commentary on Isaiah, says he agrees with them. Think about what that implies. The man who put the word Lucifer into the Latin text wrote in his commentary that the Hebrew word probably means the one who wails. With that reading, the verse doesn't say how you have fallen, O shining one. It says something closer to howl, you who have fallen from heaven. I'm not saying that's the correct reading. Most modern Hebraists follow the first. I want you to see something else. On that word was built a proper name and identity and centuries of literature. And its very root was in dispute among the oldest translators we have. You can't build a name on that foundation, and yet one was built. Now it would be very easy for this video to turn here into mockery of the tradition. It's not going to do that, because the tradition has arguments, and they need to be put on the table before touching them. Origen read this passage thinking of Satan's fall. Tertullian did too. Jerome himself, in his commentary on Isaiah, connected this text with Jesus' words in Luke 10:18. "I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning." These are not naive people. They're some of the most careful readers the church has ever had. And before touching that material, you already know where this channel is headed. The final answer of this video is Jesus Christ. There's something more, still more uncomfortable for the simple reading. When Paul describes the man of sin in his second letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 2, verse 4, he says he opposes and exalts himself against everything that is called God. That sentence resembles in a troubling way what verses 13 and 14 of Isaiah 14 say. In other words, the instinct of people who go looking there is not foolish. There is something real in that chapter. We'll come back to it later in this video, and you'll see exactly what it is. Because it's one of the most useful things Isaiah ever wrote. But none of those readings gives you a name, neither Origen, nor Tertullian, nor Jerome, nor Paul. Nobody walks out of there with a name in hand. However, there is a place inside the book of Isaiah where there is a name written, a proper name, with letters that a translator put there. It's not in chapter 14. Before getting there, one thing needs to be clarified, the kind of thing that changes the whole conversation. The word Antichrist does not appear in the book of Isaiah, nor in Daniel, nor in Ezekiel, nor in the second letter to the Thessalonians, nor in Revelation. You may have heard those 5 books cited 1,000 times when the topic comes up, and they're cited correctly because they speak about the figure. But the word itself is in none of them. The word appears in 4 places in all the Bible, and all 4 are from John. 1 John 2:18, 1 John 2:22, 1 John 4:3, and 2 John 7. In the first of those verses, there's a detail worth hearing in full, because it's almost always cited in half. 1 John 2:18 says, "Little children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come." Many, in the plural. John is not presenting a puzzle. He's saying the thing is already happening, and it's happening in many people at once. So where do all the other texts come from? From a different vocabulary. And it's worth having this vocabulary clear, because we're going to use it from here on. Paul calls him the man of sin and the son of destruction. He also calls him simply the lawless one. Daniel, in chapter 7, sees a little horn that speaks great things. John, in Revelation, sees a beast rising from the sea. 4 different images from 4 different authors across 3 different centuries. None of them brings a name. Now, the piece of information that opens the door of this video. Of the entire book of Isaiah, 66 chapters, there is one single verse the New Testament applies directly to that figure. 1. Paul cites it in 2 Thessalonians 2:8, and that verse is Isaiah 11:4. In other words, the only place where Isaiah touches this figure is exactly the same place where someone, centuries later, went to write a name. To understand how that name got there, you need to step inside a building. Imagine a synagogue after the exile. The town doesn't matter much. It could be any of the dozens that existed between Babylon and Galilee. People no longer speak Hebrew in the street. They haven't for generations. The language of the market, the home, the argument between neighbors is Aramaic. Hebrew was left where languages go when life moves on, in the scroll. So on the Sabbath, something happens that would be hard to imagine today. A man stands up and reads the text in Hebrew, out loud, the way it has always been read, and most of those listening understand little or nothing. That's why there's a second man. He's called the Meturgeman. He's the translator. He stands beside the reader, and his job is to take each verse and say it in Aramaic so the people understand what they just heard. Here comes the rule that changes everything, because it's a real rule and not a decorative detail. The Meturgiman cannot read. He is forbidden to hold a scroll while translating, and he cannot look at the Hebrew text either. He must do it from memory, out loud, in front of everyone. The rules are in Tractate Megillah, and they are detailed. In the Torah, 1 verse is translated at a time. In the prophets, 3 at a time. Isaiah is prophets. Why that prohibition? So no one confuses the two things. The text being read is scripture. What the translator says is translation. One is written, the other is human, and everyone in the room must be able to notice the difference. Imagine the scene. The reader finishes a verse and lowers his voice. The translator breathes and begins. The room is quiet. Someone at the back nods because they recognized a word. A child asks something, and his mother silences him with her hand. The translator, speaking from memory, doesn't always say only what the text says. Sometimes he explains, sometimes he clarifies who the king being mentioned is. Sometimes he changes an expression that was no longer understood in his time. That wasn't fraud, it was the craft. Over the centuries, those spoken translations became fixed. Someone began writing them down. And so were born the Targums, Aramaic versions of the biblical text that carry inside them, mixed into the translation, the explanations of those who made them. The Targum of the prophets is known as Targum Jonathan. And there in Isaiah 11:4, there is a word that doesn't exist in the Hebrew. If you want to see how far this goes, subscribe now. What comes next is the part that names this video. Let's go to the verse. Isaiah 11:4 in Hebrew says this: "He shall judge the poor with righteousness and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked." That last word, wicked, is in Hebrew rasha. It's a common word. It appears throughout the Old Testament. It means the guilty one, the criminal, the one on the wrong side of judgment. It is not the name of anyone. It's a category. Now listen to how that same verse sounds in the Targum, in Aramaic. Everything runs the same until the end, and when it reaches the last line, where the Hebrew says he shall kill the wicked, the Aramaic says something else. It says, he shall kill Armilus the wicked. There it is, that's the name. This is not an interpretation of mine. It's not a reading between the lines. It's a word that's there where the Hebrew has no equivalent word at all. The translator took a category, rasha, the wicked, and placed a proper name on top of it. That's not just any name. It has a history, and that history is what makes this video exist. Armilus, in Jewish tradition, is a very specific character. Jastro's dictionary is the reference work for rabbinic Aramaic, and it defines him in 2 lines, a mythical figure representative of evil. It also clarifies that he corresponds to the figure Christians call the Antichrist. About the origin of the name, Jastrow says something that's hard to forget. He says Armilus is a disguise of Romulus. Romulus, that is, Rome. The label of the final enemy in that tradition is the name of an empire with the letters rearranged. What is told of him fits what you probably already know. He rises after Gog and Magog. He goes up to Jerusalem. He kills the Messiah son of Joseph, and he is destroyed by the Messiah son of David. In case any doubt remained that the 2 traditions are speaking of the same character, there are medieval Jewish sources that say so without ambiguity. One of them, the Avkat Rokel, writes a sentence that needs no explanation. His name is Armilus, the Satan, whom the Gentiles call Antichristos, with those words in a Jewish text. Now, before continuing, I owe you a precision, because this channel doesn't function without it. That reading appears in the printed editions of the Targum, which are the ones that have been circulating for centuries and the ones commentators cite. I did not collate the manuscripts. The critical reference translation is that of Bruce Chilton in the series The Aramaic Bible, and that's where you need to go if you want the full critical apparatus. I say this because in a moment, you're going to see why that precision matters, and I don't want you to find out from somewhere else. Because the question that follows is not what the name says, it's who wrote it, and that answer changes the entire video. That label is documented in Jewish texts, beginning with a book called Sefer Zerubbabel. It's a small messianic apocalypse, and it's dated to the 7th century of our era. 7th, 1400 years after Isaiah. After that book, the name reappears in other places. The most well-known is the Midrash Vayosha, which is from the 11th century and was first printed in Constantinople in 1519. So the name doesn't come from the time of the prophets, it comes from the Middle Ages. It's worth knowing what is told about him in that book, because there's a detail that explains everything. The Jewish encyclopedia summarizes it in one line: a king who will rise at the end of time against the Messiah and who will be defeated by him after having brought great anguish upon Israel. So far, nothing unexpected. The account also includes his origin. And according to that account, Armilus is not born the way a man is born. He is born from a stone statue. In some versions, from contact between Satan and an image. In others, from Satan and a virgin. Read that again. A being conceived in a supernatural way. An adversary who has no human father, born of a virgin or of a stone. The Jewish encyclopedia itself marks the problem and doesn't hide it. It says the origin of this figure is questionable precisely because of that, because of the variants and because of the evident relationship, if not directly the parody, with Christian doctrine, legend, and scripture. Put another way, Jewish specialists themselves, when describing Armilus, note that the character appears to have been built as an inverted mirror of something already circulating on the other side. And that detail doesn't weaken the data. It makes it more interesting. Because if Armilus is a mirror, then what that scribe wrote inside Isaiah 11 was not an ancient revelation. It was a response, a figure assembled in the 7th century in the middle of a debate between communities and placed inside a text that was 1400 years old. The name is real, it's written, and it comes from much later than the name itself claims. There's one more detail, and it's the one that closes the circle. Scholars who work on the Sefer Zerubbabel ask an obvious question: if Armilus is Romulus in disguise, and Romulus is Rome, which Rome does the author mean? Because in the 7th century, Rome was no longer the city of the Caesars. The power that carried Rome's name was in Constantinople. The most accepted reading is that Armilus is a cryptogram, a code name for a specific emperor, Heraclius. Heraclius reigned between the years 610 and 641. That is, he was on the throne at exactly the time that text was being composed. Stop here for a second, because this is what actually happened. A man, sitting somewhere in the empire in a century of war, looked at the emperor who governed his street, the one who decided about his city, his community, his life, and reached the conclusion that this man was the final enemy announced by the prophets. Then he took the book of Isaiah, looked for where it would fit, and wrote the name in there. It fit perfectly. The name matched his moment, his emperor, the news arriving at his door. He was wrong. Now notice something he didn't see, and that's the reason we're talking about this. Of the 66 chapters of Isaiah, he went to write that name in exactly the verse that least suited him, because chapter 11 is not talking about that. It's talking about something completely different. And to understand what, you have to go back 1400 more years. The year 734 before Christ. Judah is a small kingdom. To give you a sense of it, it would fit several times inside any mid-sized province of your country. And it sits right on the road that connects the two richest zones of the ancient world. To the northeast, something is growing that nobody knows how to stop. It's called Assyria, and its king is Tiglath-Pileser III. He's swallowing up kingdom after kingdom, And moving westward, small kingdoms do the only thing they can think of. Joined together, a coalition against Assyria forms. It's headed by two men, Rezin, king of Damascus in Syria, and Pekah, king of Israel, the northern kingdom that Isaiah calls Ephraim. The two of them go looking for Judah. They want the king of Jerusalem to join the alliance. And what does the king of Jerusalem answer? No. That king is called Ahaz. He's new to the throne. The other two's response is not diplomatic, it's military. They decide to march down on Jerusalem, remove Ahaz from the throne, and put someone in his place who will sign. Here, the biblical text does something remarkable. In Isaiah 7:6, the words of the plan are recorded as if someone had overheard them. They go like this: "Let us go up against Judah and terrify it, and let us conquer it for ourselves, and set up the son of Tabeel as king in the midst of it." The son of Tabeel. We don't know who he was. Nobody does. He wasn't even left a name, only his father's. He was going to be Jerusalem's puppet king, and nothing remains of him but that line. Now put yourself in Ahaz's position. Two armies are coming toward your city to kill you. Behind them, further away, comes the empire that provoked all of this. You have walls, a few thousand men, and a question that won't let you sleep. Verse 2 of chapter 7 describes how he was, and the image it uses you won't forget. His heart and the heart of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake before the wind. Not one tree, the whole forest, all moving at once in the same direction, unable to do anything else. At that moment, God sends a prophet. Isaiah doesn't find him in the palace. He finds him outside. The text gives the exact location, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool, on the road to the fuller's field. Ahaz is inspecting the water. That's how a king who expects a siege acts. He goes to check where his city will drink from when they surround it. He's doing survival calculations with a water jar in his hands. God sends the prophet with a specific instruction: to bring his son. The boy's name is Shear-Jashub, and his name means a remnant will return. A prophet and a child at an aqueduct in front of a terrified king. The message is short: be quiet, do not fear, and do not let your heart be faint. Smoldering stumps, what's left of burned wood. The two kings that have Jerusalem paralyzed are for God two sticks that have gone out and are still smoking. Then comes the part that decides the whole chapter. God offers Ahaz a blank check. He says, "Ask a sign of the Lord your God. Let it be as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. Whatever you want, up, down, anywhere. Ask." And what does the king answer? He answers with a phrase that sounds pious: "I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test." It's a textbook answer. It's the kind of phrase that in any religious meeting sounds fine and no one disputes. It's a lie. We know it's a lie because we have the other side of the story. 2 Kings 16 records it and leaves no room for doubt. Ahaz had already made his decision. He had already sent messengers to Assyria. The message he sent is quoted, and it's one of the saddest sentences any king of the house of David ever spoke. "I am your servant and your son. Come up and rescue me, your servant and your son." A king of Jerusalem calling himself a son of an Assyrian emperor. He didn't go empty-handed. The text says, "He took the silver and gold found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house, and sent it as a gift." He emptied the temple to pay for protection. That's the question that runs through this whole block of Isaiah. Not when does the world end? It's this: when the great power comes toward you, from whom do you buy protection? To Ahaz, God still gives the sign he didn't ask for. It's verse 14. The one read every December, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." Emmanuel means God with us. Think about the moment in which that was said. To a king who had just decided that God wasn't enough. The sign is literally the name of what he was rejecting. Now what happened next? Because the story has an ending. And the ending is what turns this into a warning. Assyria came. Tiglath-Pileser did exactly what Ahaz asked him. He crushed Damascus, killed Rezin, and dismantled the north of Israel. The plan worked. Judah became a vassal of the empire it called in to save itself. Isaiah had said so. And the image he used to say it comes a few lines later, and it's one of the strongest in the whole Old Testament. Isaiah 8 verse 6. God says, "Because this people has refused the waters of Shiloh that flow gently." Shiloh was Jerusalem's spring, a trickle of water, quiet without force, entering the city through a channel. Nobody was impressed by it, but it was what kept Jerusalem alive. Because they scorned that, says verse 7, "Therefore the Lord is bringing up against them the waters of the river, mighty and many, the king of Assyria and all his glory." The river, to anyone in that region, was the Euphrates, the river of empire. Verse 8 caps it. Passing on into Judah, it will overflow and pass on, reaching even to the neck. To the neck. Read it again with what you now know. Ahaz called Assyria in so he wouldn't drown. And Assyria is the water reaching up to his throat. The protector he bought is the flood. That's the mechanism Isaiah is describing, and it's not a prophecy about the distant future. It's a report on what just happened in his own city. The power from which you purchase security ends up being the power that possesses you. If this is serving you, tell me in the comments. I want to know if something came to mind while you were listening to this part. Now pay attention, because inside that same chapter, in the middle of that same crisis, God gives Isaiah 2 orders. And both of them speak to us. Before those 2 orders, that section ends with an image that needs to be heard in full, because it's where the bill arrives. Isaiah 7 verse 20. The prophet describes what God will do with Assyria, and the word he uses is from the barber shop. "In that day the Lord will shave with a razor that is hired, beyond the river with the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet, and it will sweep away the beard also." A hired razor. Think about the verb, hired. Someone paid for it. And you already know who paid for it because you heard it a few minutes ago. It was the silver and gold from the house of the Lord, sent to Nineveh with a message that said, "I am your servant and your son." Ahaz hired a razor to defend himself. And the razor he hired is the one that's going to shave all of Judah from head to foot. And that, in that world, was a public humiliation. The Bible records the gesture in 2 Samuel 10, when the king of the Ammonites shaves half the beard of David's ambassadors and sends them back that way. You take the hair, you take the beard, and you return the man to the street, transformed into something else. That's what the text is saying will happen to the kingdom. The verses that follow describe the field afterward. Where there were 1,000 vines worth 1,000 shekels of silver. Verse 23 says, "There will be briars and thorns, and people going there with bow and arrow, because it's no longer a vineyard, it's wilderness." That's the real price of the contract the king signed. There's one last detail of this block, and it changes the way you read the prophet. Isaiah didn't just speak. His whole family was part of the message. You already saw that God told him to bring his son to the aqueduct. The boy's name was Shear-Jashub, and it means a remnant will return. That child walked through Jerusalem with a prophecy hanging from his name. Every time his mother called him from the doorway, the whole street heard the announcement. Shortly after, a second son is born. God himself dictates the name, and it's 4 words strung together, Maher-Shalal-Hashbaz. It means the spoil speeds, the prey hurries. A baby named the plundering comes fast. The text explains why. "Before the boy knows how to call my father and my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria." In other words, the deadline of the prophecy was the age of a child learning to talk. 2 years, 3 at most. A few verses later, Isaiah says it himself. "Here am I, and the children the Lord has given me are signs and portents in Israel." Do you understand what that meant for his family? His house was the billboard. Notice the contrast, because it's not accidental. On the other side, there's a king emptying a temple to pay an army. On this side, there's a man who has nothing to offer but his name, his children's names, and a message nobody wants. That's what he plants himself in front of the throne with. The first order is in verse 11, and the text marks that it was spoken in a special way. It says the Lord spoke to him with a strong hand and taught him not to walk in the way of this people. With a strong hand, like someone grabbing your arm so you don't cross the street. And he says this, verses 12 and 13, "Do not call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy, and do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy. Let him be your fear, and let him be your dread." To understand the weight of that order, you have to see the air being breathed in Jerusalem that year. 2 armies on the border, a king making secret negotiations with an empire, a candidate for the throne waiting his turn. Nobody knew who was with whom. In a city like that, everyone sees plots. Every movement means something. Every official who travels is selling the city. Every messenger brings a betrayal. In the middle of that air, there's a prophet telling the king to make no alliance with anyone. What do you think they were saying about Isaiah in the corridors? A man opposing the only available defense in the middle of a national emergency. It's very likely that he himself was accused of conspiring. God's order isn't to clarify the rumor, it's to not participate in the game. Don't call what this people calls conspiracy a conspiracy. Don't have the fear they have. That fear belongs to them. Don't borrow it. In its place, fear God. That's the complete substitution. The fear isn't eliminated, it's redirected. The second order is a few verses later, and it's the one this video can't skip. Verse 19. "And when they say to you, inquire of the mediums and the necromancers who chirp and mutter." Who chirp and mutter. The prophet is describing a sound, the one made by those who speak softly in a closed room, because what they're doing isn't done in full light. Then he says where they get the information. Should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? That's the market that opens when people are terrified and want to know what's going to happen. It's not peasant superstition. It's a service, and it has demand because the future is frightening. And what's the answer the prophet gives? It's in verse 20, and it's 5 words, to the law and to the testimony. Go back to the text, that's all. I'm not giving you an alternative channel. I'm not giving you a hidden piece of data. I'm sending you back to the book you already have. Hold on to those 2 verses, because at the end of this video, you're going to see who cites them and to whom they're applied. Now let's return to the story, because God's answer to all of this is missing, and it's not a warning, it's a promise. Chapter 10 ends with the empire. Verse 15, shall the axe boast over him who hews with it? It's a question that disarms. Assyria thinks it's the subject of history. Isaiah tells it that it's a tool. The axe doesn't decide where the blow falls. Then comes the image. Verses 33 and 34, the Lord of hosts will lop the boughs with terrifying power. The great in height will be hewn down, and the lofty will be brought low. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with an axe. There's the forest again. Notice what Isaiah has done. In chapter 7, the king's heart trembled like the trees of the forest. Now, 3 chapters later, the whole forest is on the ground, not just Assyria. Everything tall, everything that rose up, the house of David included, because that dynasty is going to be reduced to nothing by this same chain of decisions. It's the landscape after the fire. Stumps, nothing standing. Then, without transition, chapter 11 begins. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. From the stump, from what was left when the tree was cut. Jesse was David's father, The prophet doesn't say from the throne of David or from the house of David. He says from the stump. He's looking at the dynasty as cut timber and announcing that something green is going to come from it. There's something more, and it's much earlier in the same book. In chapter 6, when Isaiah receives his calling, God describes the disaster coming, and he closes with this image. As the terebinth and the oak, when they are felled, the stump remains. The holy seed is its stump. The same image, 5 chapters earlier. I want to be precise here because it matters. In Hebrew, it's not the same word in both verses. They're two different terms. What repeats is the image, not the vocabulary, but the image is unmistakable, everything cut, and a stump remains. Now, what kind of king comes from there? Because this is the point where chapter 11 gives you the answer to Ahaz's question. Verse 2 says, "The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him." Verses 3 and 4 describe how he judges, not by what his eyes see, nor by what his ears hear. He shall judge the poor with righteousness and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. Then the line you already know. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Stop there. With the breath of his lips. If this is the kind of study you were looking for, the subscribe button is right there below. No army, no coalition, no tribute, no temple silver sent to any foreign capital, no messengers saying I am your servant and your son, just a breath. That's the contrast Isaiah is building. Ahaz emptied the temple to buy an army. The king who is coming doesn't need one. Now come back with me to the 7th century scribe. Of the whole book, that man chose exactly this verse to write the enemy's name, that verse which says the enemy doesn't require a war. The verse whose news is not who the wicked person is, but how easily the matter is finished. He went to find an identity in the only place where the text was telling him that an identity wasn't needed. Now we can return to chapter 14, which we left open at the beginning, because that chapter has something very valuable, and it's not an identity. The poem, as we saw, is directed against the king of Babylon, and what it does is reproduce, in the first person, what that power says to itself inside. Verses 13 and 14, listen to them as a list of intentions. I will ascend to heaven. Above the stars of God I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. 5 times, 5 first-person declarations, each one a step higher than the last. None of that is a psychological portrait of a demon. It's the autobiography of an empire. It's what a human power says to itself when it has won too many wars in a row. Verse 15 answers in a single line, but you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. 5 steps upward, 1 sentence downward. And where does the language of that poem come from? There's an explanation, and it makes the text sharper, not less. In the texts discovered at Ugarit, a city on the Syrian coast, appear names Isaiah is using. Shachar is the Canaanite god of the dawn. And there is an account of a lesser deity who tries to take the throne of Mount Zaphon, the seat of the supreme God, and who fails and falls. Isaiah is borrowing the myth from the neighbors, and he's using it as mockery. He's telling the king of Babylon, you think you're the character in that story? Well, look at how that story ends. Herder and Gunkel were among the first to notice this. Brevard Childs explained it well. The prophet reuses borrowed mythological material to build a taunt song. Now the piece of information that orders the whole chapter, verses 24 to 27 immediately after the poem, don't speak about Babylon. They speak about Assyria. God swears, I will break the Assyrian in my land, and on my mountains trample him underfoot. Verse 28 dates the next oracle with these words, in the year that King Ahaz died. Chapter 14 never left the file. It's still the same matter. What happens to the empires from whom people buy protection? The years pass. Ahaz dies. His son Hezekiah rises to the throne, a much better king than his father. Jerusalem makes the same mistake. The enemy changed, the partner changed, the generation changed. The logic is identical. Now the threat is still Assyria, but the seller of security is someone else. It's Egypt. To the south, with horses, with chariots, with a military reputation that at that point was already older than anyone's memory. Once again, messengers leave Jerusalem with gifts, looking for a signature. Isaiah 30, verses 1 and 2, says it by name and surname. "Ah," says the Lord, "to the rebellious children who carry out a plan, but not mine, and who make an alliance, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin, who set out to go down to Egypt without asking for my direction, to take refuge in the protection of Pharaoh." Chapter 31 opens with the short version. Woe to those who go down to Egypt for help and rely on horses. But the sharpest description of that policy is not in those chapters. It's a few chapters earlier, and it's one of the most uncomfortable texts in all of Isaiah. Imagine the room. The men who govern Jerusalem are there. They're not frightened peasants. They're the ruling class. They've just received news from the south. The negotiation with Egypt is going well. Someone raises a cup. Someone says that finally they can sleep in peace. And someone else, with the confidence that comes from having solved a problem the practical way, says the sentence Isaiah is going to quote word for word. Chapter 28, verse 14. The prophet addresses them like this. "Therefore hear the word of the Lord, you scoffers who rule this people in Jerusalem." Scoffers, not unbelievers, not confused. People who laugh. Verse 15 is the word-for-word quote of what they were saying. "We have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have made an agreement. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, it will not come to us. For we have made lies our refuge, and in falsehood we have taken shelter." Listen carefully to what they're buying. They're not buying armies. They're buying an idea. They're buying the certainty that the disaster will pass alongside them and not touch them. That's what's always being sold. Immunity. There's a detail in that phrase I want you to notice because it's uncomfortably honest. The text puts in their mouths the words, "We have made lies our refuge." Did you notice what they just admitted? They know it's a lie. They're not deceived. They're hiding there on purpose because you sleep better there. Now what does God answer? And here comes what makes this passage worth the entire video. He doesn't answer with a threat. Not yet. Before the verdict, in the middle of the text about the false covenant, he puts something else. Verse 16, "Behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not be in haste." Stop at the last line. Ahaz ran to Assyria, Hezekiah ran to Egypt. The scoffers signed because the scourge was coming. God's answer to a covenant with death is not a counter-covenant. It's not a better alliance, a superior strategy, or a secret piece of information. It's a stone, something already placed, which doesn't move, and on which a frightened man can stand. Only after placing that foundation does the verdict come. Verse 18, "Then your covenant with death will be annulled, and your agreement with Sheol will not stand. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, you will be beaten down by it." Annulled. The contract breaks exactly when you need it. There's a manuscript detail that fits here in a way that gives you chills. In the great Isaiah scroll, the one found in the Dead Sea caves, and 1,000 years older than the copies we had before, that word scourge is read as flood. Flood. Go back to chapter 8. The waters of the river rising to the throat. It's the same water, a generation later with a different partner and the same water. About that stone, there's a detail you can verify for yourself right now with a Bible in hand. It'll take 10 seconds and it's worth it. Open Isaiah 28:16. The last line in most English versions says, "Whoever believes will not be in haste." Now open Romans 9:33, where Paul cites that same verse, and read how he cites it. Whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. They don't say the same thing. One speaks of haste, the other speaks of shame. Did Paul get it wrong? No. He's quoting from the Greek translation, the Septuagint, which was the Bible used by the communities he was writing to. And the Greek translators, when they came to that Hebrew word, made a different decision. The Hebrew has a verb that means to hurry, to act in panic. The Greek moved it in another direction. He will not be put to shame, will not be let down. Peter does exactly the same thing in his first letter, chapter 2, verse 6. He cites the stone and cites the Greek version. Here's the good part, because the two readings don't fight. They complete each other. The one who rests on that stone doesn't run and doesn't end up humiliated, which is exactly what happened to those who signed with Egypt. To those men in chapter 30, God says the sentence that summarizes the whole book, verse 15. Listen to it slowly, because it's one of the hardest in all of Scripture. Not because of what it says, but because of how it ends. For thus said the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel, in returning and rest you shall be saved, in quietness and in trust shall be your strength. Then 4 words, and you were not willing. There the verse ends. God offers the way out, and the text records the refusal on the same line. No discussion, no argument from the other side, no explanation. The offer and the no. The next verse explains why, in their own words. But you said, no, we will flee upon horses, we will flee. They preferred to do something, anything, rather than stand still before a threat. That's the trap the prophet has been describing since chapter 7. Not the trap of wickedness, it's the trap of fear in a hurry. A frightened man will sign anything. If you know someone who goes around looking for names in the news, this video is for that person. Then the empire grows tired of waiting and comes in person. Isaiah 36. The king of Assyria has already swept away the fortified cities of Judah. He's camped at Lachish, about 30 miles southwest of Jerusalem, and from there sends an officer with a large army to the capital's gate. And for this siege, we don't depend only on the biblical text. Sennacherib had the taking of Lachish carved on the walls of his palace in Nineveh in a series of enormous reliefs. The ramps, the battering rams, the prisoners leaving the city with whatever they could carry. Those reliefs were excavated in the 19th century and today are in the British Museum. You can go see them. It's one of the few episodes in the Old Testament where you have the account from both sides. That of Judah, written in Jerusalem, and that of the empire, carved in stone by the king who did it, and Sennacherib's own annals, written on a 6-sided clay prism, also in the British Museum, tell the campaign with names and figures. 46 walled cities of Judah taken. And about the king, this sentence. I shut him up like a bird in a cage in Jerusalem, his royal city. Shut up. That was the word he chose. And nowhere in that prism does it say he took the city. That's not a minor detail. Assyrian royal inscriptions existed to celebrate victories. They didn't record defeats. When the silence appears exactly where the greatest trophy of the campaign should be, that silence says something. The officer carries the title of Shachar. He's something like a field commander, though the word comes from a palace title. He's the one who speaks. Now, I want you to hear where he stops, because the text gives it with a precision that is not accidental. Verse 2, he stood by the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field. Go back with me to chapter 7, verse 3, when God sends Isaiah to find Ahaz. Where does he tell him to go? To the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field. It's the same phrase, word for word, the same place. Commentators notice and point this out. It's not an obscure finding. It's in the study notes of almost any serious edition. And the conclusion is the one already forming in your mind. The book is placing 2 scenes on the same point on the map, a generation apart. so you'll compare them. On that exact patch of ground, a prophet told a king not to be afraid and offered him a sign from God. Now, on that exact same patch of ground, a foreign official plants himself to make a different offer. Hezekiah's men go out to receive him. The text gives all three names: Eliakim, who was over the household, Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, the recorder. The Rabshakeh begins to speak, and the first thing he says, is this, verse 6. Behold, you are trusting in Egypt, that broken reed of a staff, which will pierce the hand of any man who leans on it. Stop there. A staff made of broken reed. You lean on it, it snaps, and the splinter goes through your hand. And who had been saying exactly that for years in the streets of Jerusalem? Isaiah. The prophet had spent entire chapters warning that leaning on Egypt was ruin. And now the empire's propagandist, standing in the same place where the prophet stood, uses the prophet's argument as ammunition. He's right, that's the uncomfortable part. About Egypt, the Rabshakeh is right. Now watch what he does next, because there's where the whole trick is. From verse 7 onward, he stops talking about Egypt and starts talking about God. He suggests Hezekiah offended the Lord with his reforms. He offers to give him 2,000 horses if only he can find riders. And he ends with the final argument: no God of any nation has delivered his land from my hand. There's the method. You start with a truth people can verify, and with that truth in hand, you sell them the conclusion you want. Hezekiah's officials try to stop him. They ask him to speak in Aramaic, which was the language of diplomacy, and not in the language of Judah, because the people on the wall are hearing everything. He refuses. He answers with a vulgarity that doesn't need repeating here, and then, deliberately, raises his voice and keeps speaking in the people's language. He didn't want to negotiate with the three officials. He wanted the people on the wall to hear. Now, the response. When the letter with the threats arrives, Hezekiah does something his father never did. Isaiah 37:14. And Hezekiah received the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up to the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. He spread the document out. He didn't answer it. He didn't convene the council. He didn't send another shipment of silver. He went up to the temple, opened the letter on the floor, and left it there. His father, in that same bind, had gone to inspect the water. He goes to the temple with the letter open on the ground. What happens next is what closes this block, because it's exactly what chapter 11 announces. Verse 36, and the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. There was no battle. There's no description of combat, no maneuvers, no alliance that arrived in time. The largest army in the known world breaks camp and leaves. Now go back to the verse this video is about. Isaiah 11:4. With the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. No army, just a breath. The prophet wasn't writing poetry. He was describing how this works. Now let's move forward 700 years, because the question that follows is obvious, and it's fair. If all these texts are about Assyria, Egypt, kings dead for 26 centuries, why do the apostles use them to speak of the final enemy? The answer is in how they use them, and it's more interesting than it looks. Paul writes the second letter to the Thessalonians. In chapter 2, he describes the figure he calls the man of sin. Verse 4, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. Compare that to the 5 steps of Isaiah 14. I will ascend, I will set up, I will sit, I will ascend, I will make myself like the Most High. It's the same movement, a human power that ends up claiming the place of God. In the middle of that chapter, Paul writes 2 verses worth looking at directly, because they're the cleanest proof of everything we're saying. 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 6 and 7. And you know what is restraining him now, so that he may be revealed in his time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains it will do so until he is out of the way. Something is holding back, and Paul says, "You know what it is." They knew, we don't. Paul is writing to people he himself had explained this to in person, sitting with them, and when he takes the pen, he decides not to write it down. From that was born one of the longest discussions in the history of biblical interpretation. You probably heard that what restrains is the Holy Spirit acting through the church. It's a serious reading with serious defenders, and it's the most widely held today in the Spanish-speaking evangelical world. The only thing I want you to know is that it's not the only one, nor the oldest. Tertullian, writing in the early 3rd century, understood what was restraining as the Roman Empire. And it wasn't just his idea. John Chrysostom, a century later, records that same reading as one of the currents. Others proposed it was the preaching of the gospel, which must reach to the end before the time closes. Others thought of the archangel Michael by the parallel with Daniel. Others said simply that it's God, and Paul didn't want to say it another way. 5 readings, none with consensus. So when someone tells you that most interpreters believe such and such about that verse, be careful. Almost always what they mean is most of the interpreters I read. Now notice the detail that makes this fit with the whole video. Paul had the information. He knew what was restraining. He could have written it. He could have left one sentence that would have saved us almost 2,000 years of discussion. 3 words in a letter, and it would be done. He didn't. The only man in the New Testament who could have put a name to that piece of the mechanism decided it wasn't necessary. Stop at the contrast with what we've seen in this video. A scribe who adds a name where the text didn't have one. A translator who copies a word and turns it into someone. A bishop who puts a face to a common noun. And on the other side, an apostle who had the information in hand and chose not to write it. That difference is not one of information, it's one of appetite. 4 verses later, Paul does something different. It's no longer an echo, it's a quote. Verse 8, "And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will kill with the breath of his mouth." With the breath of his mouth. That's Isaiah 11:4. The commentators record it without dispute. Ellicott, for example, says directly that Paul is making a free citation of that verse, and the same text of Isaiah is behind the scene in Revelation 19, when from the mouth of the one who comes there proceeds a sword. There you have it. Out of 66 chapters, the New Testament goes to Isaiah 11:4, and what it takes from there is not an identity, it's a sentence. There's a third thing Paul says, and it closes the parallel with what you've already seen. Verses 9 through 11, "The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false. I'm going to mark this carefully because it's my reading and not a documented citation. When I read that sentence, I can't help hearing the rulers of Jerusalem saying, "We have made lies our refuge." I'm not saying Paul is citing Isaiah 28. I'm saying they describe the same transaction, and you decide whether the resemblance means something. What can be stated is this, and it's the key to the entire video. Leave me your comment if you reached this point thinking of something specific. I read them. The prophet was not drawing a wanted poster of an individual. He was documenting a mechanism. That's why the apostles can use those texts. Not because Isaiah was seeing a face, but because these things repeat. And what repeats works for any century, including this one. So let's go back to the man who wrote the name. You already know what he did. He looked at Heraclius, the emperor who governed his world, and decided that man was the final enemy announced by the prophets. Then he searched Isaiah for the slot to put him, and he put him in. It fit. It fit perfectly. The name matched his moment, his emperor, the news arriving at his door. He was wrong. Now notice something he didn't see, and it's the reason we're talking about this. He went to write that name in exactly the verse that least suited him, because chapter 11 is not talking about that. What's remarkable is not that he did it. What's remarkable is how many people did exactly the same thing afterward. When Napoleon crossed Europe, identifications were published. When the German Kaiser took the world into the First War, identifications were published. With Mussolini, identifications were published. With Hitler, identifications were published. In the 1970s, the turn came to an American Secretary of State, and there were those who sat down to do calculations with the letters of his surname. Here I want to show you one of those calculations because it's the one that connects directly to the chapter with which we began this video. Remember the word Helel from Isaiah 14:12? In Hebrew, it's written with 4 letters, and in the gematria system, each Hebrew letter has a numerical value. You can do the math yourself right now without knowing Hebrew. The first letter is worth 5, the second 10, the third 30, the fourth 30. Add it up. 5 plus 10 plus 30 plus 30. 75, and it's not 666. It doesn't resemble it. There's no honest operation that gets you from one to the other. Nevertheless, a little more than a decade ago, there were publications that used that 75 to point to a sitting president. They counted days between dates on his calendar until the result came out 75 and presented that as confirmation. That man finished his term and went home. Don't think this was the obsession of just one side. The same thing happened on the other side, in nearly the same centuries. Let's go for a moment to Daniel, chapter 11, verse 38. That verse describes a king who forsakes the gods of his fathers and honors instead something the text calls the God of fortresses. In Hebrew, it sounds like this: Eloah Mauzim. Mauzim comes from a common word. Mauz means stronghold, refuge, fortress. Daniel uses it several times in that same chapter to speak of walled cities and military positions. It's a common noun. Does it sound grand? It's like saying the God of the barracks. Now look at what happened with that word. Theodotion, who made a Greek version of the Old Testament, didn't translate it. He left it as is, as if it were a name, and centuries later the Geneva Bible did the same in English. Suddenly, on the page, a being appeared called Mauzim. Already in the 5th century, a bishop named Theodoret took that reading and made the final move. He explained that Mauzim was the Antichrist. Does the mechanism sound familiar? A common noun, a translator who copies it instead of translating it, a proper name born from that copying, and a later reader who puts a face to it. It's the same movement as in chapter 14, and the same as the name the Aramaic put in chapter 11. 3 times, in 3 different traditions with 3 different words. About what that expression in Daniel actually means, the discussion is still open today. Gesenius thought it referred to Jupiter Capitolinus, to whom Antiochus Epiphanes built a temple in Antioch, a fact recorded by the Roman historian Livy. Other commentators proposed Mars, others Melkart, the god of Tyre. There's one observation that cuts the matter at the root. A god called Mauzim appears nowhere else. Not in a biblical text, not in an Assyrian record, not in an inscription, nowhere, because it was never a name. Now I want you to see the complete pattern, because it's the heart of all of this. A scribe in the 7th century, publications in the 19th century, publications in the 20th, publications in the 21st, all using the same method, all convinced that their moment was the one, all with a text of Isaiah open on the table. How many got it right? 0 in 1400 years. Notice something, because I don't want you to leave here thinking the conclusion is that nothing is happening and all of this is a story. The conclusion is the opposite, and it's much more uncomfortable. They failed in the identification, and they didn't fail in the diagnosis. Isaiah described a three-piece mechanism, and all three pieces are functioning today, in front of you, without needing any dates or any calculations. The first piece is in chapter 8, verse 19. Frightened people asking those who chirp and mutter, wanting to know what's going to happen. That didn't stop. It just changed format. The future is still the best-selling product there is, and there's always someone willing to charge you in advance for a piece of it. The second is in chapter 28, verse 15. A covenant that promises the disaster will pass alongside you without touching you. Someone tells you you're covered, and you know it's not entirely true, and you sign anyway because you sleep better there. Refuge in the lie, in those exact words. The third is in chapter 14, verse 13, a human power that begins to speak about itself with verbs that don't belong to it. I will ascend. I will lift up. I will be. That matches today. It matches exactly, but it doesn't match the way a date on a calendar matches. It matches the way a portrait matches the face of whoever is looking at it. Against all three pieces, the prophet gave one single order. It's in chapter 8, verses 12 and 13. And you already heard it a while ago. Now hear it, knowing everything you know. Do not call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy, and do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy. Let him be your fear, and let him be your dread. It was given to a prophet in a surrounded city in the worst year of its history, with the enemy 2 days' march away. It's not advice for peaceful times. It's an order given in an emergency. And what makes all of this not end in the year 734 before Christ? 700 years later, a fisherman from Galilee writes to a group of Christians being persecuted, people with real fear for real reasons. It's Peter. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 14 and 15. All he does is cite this text. He writes, "Do not be afraid of their threats, and do not be troubled." That's Isaiah 8:12, word for word. Then he continues with the second half of the command. Isaiah had said, "The Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy." Peter writes, "But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy." There are manuscripts, and they are the best ones, where that phrase reads differently. It reads, "But in your hearts, honor Christ as Lord." Peter took the order that referred to the Lord of hosts, the name of God in Isaiah, and aimed it at Jesus. The fear changes recipient, just as in Isaiah. Only now the recipient has a face. One last thing remains, and that's where everything ends. One verse after the order, in Isaiah 8:14, the text says he will become a sanctuary and a stone of offense. A stone. It's the same image from chapter 28, the one God places in the middle of the covenant with death, the one Paul and Peter apply to Christ. The two chapters we've been talking about, separated by 20 chapters and a whole generation, both end on the same thing. A stone already placed. Now look at where we are. Chapter 11 of Isaiah opens like this: "There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse." That chapter is about the Messiah. It's about the king who comes from the stump, about the one who judges the poor with righteousness, about the one who doesn't need to buy protection from anyone. In that whole chapter, the wicked appears once. And he appears in verse 4, in the last line, as the object of the verb. The wicked is not the subject of the sentence. He is what comes out of the mouth of the one who is. That's where a man, 1400 years ago, went to write a name. He chose the wrong line. The verse wasn't answering who the enemy is, it was answering who the king is. That answer hasn't changed in 26 centuries. I have another video about the man who decided, in the 4th century, how we were going to call that enemy in all the languages of the West. It's appearing on your screen now.